Then on Sports Central, we go over our 2022 college football predictions for the Purdue Boilermakers, team that went 9-4 overall in the 2021 season. The big dark horse team of the Big Ten last season was Purdue. This team got up to 9 wins and pulled off a couple of major upsets in the 2021 season. About this team being 2022 and whether or not this team could potentially be even better in the 2022 season is what we go over here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video. Starting out with your team trends. Purdue 9-4 last season. They're 4-2 in their first 6 games, 5-2 in their last 7. And this was a good football team last season in Purdue. They pulled off a couple of major wins and they took a couple of bad losses, but in the end, I mean, 9-4 is a solid record. And this team, I mean, they were consistently good last season. They went in Iowa City. That was the first time that we really saw Purdue as an impressive team. There was against Iowa when they went in there against the number 2 team in the nation, beat them 24-7. And that wasn't the only time they're going to beat a top 4 team in the nation. They also beat Michigan State 40-29 there on November 6th, which was a massive upset win. And I mean, Purdue, this team was, I mean, they were outstanding in those big matchups last season. And back, I mean, even in week 1 when they played Oregon State there, Oregon State turned out to be a pretty good team last year, and Purdue beat them 30-21. They also beat Nebraska on the road 28-23. They lost to Ohio State. That kind of, I mean, that was a matchup where some people were saying, oh, Purdue's going to go in there and beat Ohio State, considering they've been the big upset team who's pulled off some major upsets. But in the end, they did lose to the Buckeyes there. But they beat Tennessee in their bowl game. What was just a massive win, a really good football game there, and they beat Tennessee 48-45. Certainly one of the best games of last season there was between Purdue and Tennessee. So yeah, 9-4 was the record. Overall, outstanding season. But let's look forward to 2022 now with your roster preview. This team does return Aidan O'Connell, the top quarterback for this team last season. Last year, I mean, he was an impressive quarterback for a good majority, and overall, he's pretty consistent. 3,700 yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 picks, and a 72% completion rate. So his stats were pretty solid last year. He also, I mean, he's not a dual threat quarterback, so his passing is what he leans on, obviously, but I mean, that was definitely his best season that he's had so far with Purdue, and really looking forward to seeing what he does here in 2022. I mean, his progression is definitely evident, and it's there, and I mean, if he can improve even more going into 2022, this Purdue team could be dangerous. Jack Plummer is taking off, though. He is transferring out of the program. He really didn't get too much playing time last season, but when he did, he put up 860 yards, 7 touchdowns, and a 60% completion rate. So we'll see how he does in his next location. But Aidan O'Connell is certainly the guy that I am definitely keeping an eye on going into next season. He is, I mean, considering how he was in 2021, if he can be even better in 2022, and once again, Purdue is a team to really keep an eye on. You do return your top running back, King Doerue, which last season he put up over 600 yards, 2 touchdowns. But you do lose your second running back in Xander Horvath, who put up just over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns last season. So you do have your top coming back in the backfield, so I'm not concerned. Receiving core, you do lose a few. You do lose David Bell, your top receiver from last season, who put up over 1,300 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's the one guy that I'm concerned about with him being gone for next season. I mean, he was just a massive impact player in the receiving core there, so it's going to be tough to lose him. Milton Wright, I mean, he was eligible to come back for this team, but unfortunately, due to academics, he is off the team now. So that's all I've heard from him, and that happened in May apparently, where he got basically booted off the team, or he's left the team. So, and that's very unfortunate because, I mean, he would have had a major impact on this team in the 2022 season. I mean, he put up 700 yards last year, 7 touchdowns. That's just a really unfortunate thing to happen for him and for Purdue. And you also lose your third receiver in Jackson Anthrop, which last season he certainly was an impact player as well, over 600 yards. And so the top running back, or sorry, the top receiver from last season coming back is Brock Thompson. Last season he put up just over 450 yards, so he's gonna definitely have to step up and have a good season here. But I'm not too concerned. There's some good depth there in the receiving core, so in the end, I think offensively this team looks just fine. You also lose 2 on the offensive line, and defensively this team looks great. You only lose 1 on the defensive line and 2 linebackers. So the linebacking core, you lose a couple, but the secondary looks great. That's going to improve a lot. And the defensive line definitely shows potential as well. So, I mean, I think this team in general looks really good going to next season. Brings up the question, is this team a major Big Ten contender in 2022? And I think this team is definitely a major contender in the Big Ten West. The Big Ten West is wide open. going into next season. You got 5 teams that I could see definitely win that division. You got Purdue, you got Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and maybe even Nebraska. And Purdue is certainly up there, I think, in my top 2. I mean, this team, they had 9 wins last season. They're returning a lot of their key players. The receiving core is the one question mark that I see on this offense. I mean, this team looks, I'd say, really good going to next season, and I really like where the Boilers are headed going into 2022 here. So, I mean, and you get to the Big Ten title game, you're going to play a really tough team out of the Big Ten East, but, I mean, you at least have a chance to win a Big Ten title, so that's what matters. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season, Marvin Grant, he is taken off to Kansas, so you do lose him in the secondary. You do bring in Cole Brevard, who's going to be an impact player, defensive lineman from Penn State. You also lose Bryce Austin, Jeff Marks, 2 defensive linemen in the transfer portal, and Callie Sanders as well, linebacker. You bring in Reese Taylor, defensive back from Indiana. You also bring in Tyrone Tracy to add some depth to that receiving core, which will be a good addition. And you also bring in T. Denson, defensive back from Kansas State. Recruiting wise, actually not bad, 30th in the nation. You are 9th in the Big Ten, so you are in that bottom half of the Big Ten there. But in the end, 30th in the nation is not bad. You got 4 4-stars and 16 3-stars coming in. So recruiting wise, it's not outstanding, but certainly I think this team is, no matter what, still built for a really good season once again here in 2022. I mean, if there's going to be a season that Purdue wins a Big Ten title, it's going to be 2022, and it's going to, I mean, it sounds crazy because Purdue usually isn't a major contender in the Big Ten, but I think this is going to be the season where Purdue could certainly be up there, and I mean, they certainly pulled off a couple of major wins in 2021. I mean, you know that this team can pull off some major upsets. It's just a matter if they can keep that consistency going and get all the way to Indianapolis. But that's still your schedule now going to next season. You start off the season with a huge game against Penn State. That is on a Thursday night, and that's a home matchup, and that's going to be, I mean, that's basically a 50-50 coin toss right there. That can be a very close game, a very competitive one. And then you got Indiana State coming to town after that, Syracuse on the road, and then Florida Atlantic in week 4. Then you start off your October against Minnesota on the road. That'll be a tough matchup. Maryland on the road as well. You got Nebraska coming to town, Wisconsin on the road then to finish out your October. And then November you got Iowa, you got Illinois on the road, Northwestern at home, and then Indiana on the road to finish out your season. So October is far and away your toughest month. You go on the road, 3 of your 4 games. Wisconsin's going to be good. Minnesota's going to be good. Maryland, can't sleep on them. And, of course, Nebraska, it could potentially be a decent season for them. So October's your toughest month. If you can get 2 wins in your October, 2 to 3 wins in October, you're in really good shape, I think, because November isn't terrible. September isn't terrible either. Let's look at your September here. Penn State, I'm going to favor the Boilers in that game. You're going to beat Penn State in a close one, and that's, I mean, I got Penn State in that 8 to 10 win range next season, so that's going to be a quality win if you can beat them, and I think that you guys do. You got Indiana State then after that, easy win. Syracuse, beat them by a couple of touchdowns, and then Florida Atlantic, you also beat them by a couple of touchdowns as well. So you're 4-0 heading into October. You should be ranked at this point probably in the top 20, top 15, I'd say. I mean, you got that Penn State win under your belt, and also if you won those 3 games by a couple of touchdowns, you're in really good shape heading into October there. Got Minnesota on the road. I do think you lose to Minnesota, the Golden Gophers next season. I do see them being in that 8 to 10 win range as well. I think the Gophers are good, and they pull that one out. It's going to be very close, and Maryland is a game that I feel like is very winnable for Purdue, but I do have you dropping that one as well, coming off of a tough road loss to Minnesota. That kind of lingers into the next week, and you lose to them. You do beat Nebraska, though, in a close one. Nebraska coming back. You're back at home. You're going to beat Nebraska, so you get a close win there. And then you go off to Madison to play Wisconsin in the 4th week of a really tough stretch, and you lose to them. So you're 5-3 heading into November, which, once again, if you can get 2 wins out of your October, I think you're in really good shape heading into November, because, I mean, that puts you at, what, 6-2 heading into November probably. And, I mean, those last 4 games are all extremely winnable, especially your last 3. So you got Iowa, then after that, you're going to beat Iowa. You took care of them last season. I don't see that changing. You got Illinois on the road. I will put that game in yellow, but I do think that you beat Illinois for sure. Northwestern, not expecting much out of them. Easy win. And then you beat Indiana by a couple of touchdowns to finish out the season. So I've got you at 9-3, which is a really good record. If you can get up to 9 wins, that puts you in a really good position, I think, because you'll be in a good position to potentially get to the Big Ten title game, except you did lose to Minnesota and Wisconsin, according to this. and I do expect Minnesota or Wisconsin to get 9 wins. So they would have the tiebreaker over you, but I do think in the end Purdue is, 9 wins would still put you in a really good position. And those Minnesota and Wisconsin games in particular are both really crucial. And then again, even if you beat Maryland, which is if you win all the games that I have you winning, plus if you beat Maryland on the road, which is very possible, that puts you at 10 wins and gives you a good chance to be in Indianapolis if you can get up to 10 wins next season. So, all possibilities are on the table for Purdue next year. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Purdue, and I appreciate you guys for watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.